Chapter 26. Laney enjoyed the perks that came with a celebrity wedding. Though she'd had to get up early, the massage, facial, and mani-pedi had been worth the lack of sleep. Now she sat in a chair, letting an amazing hairdresser twist her blonde hair into a fabulous style, as another makeup artist perfected her face. Mary Ann and Nancy were enjoying a similar treatment just a few feet away. "It is beautiful," the hairdresser said, as she stepped back, and Laney had to agree. Her blonde locks fell in perfect waves against her shoulders. The makeup artist finished applying her lipstick, and then Laney slipped out of her street clothes and into her dress. It, too, was something she never could have afforded, a strapless Vera Wang that hugged her curves in all the right ways. Red, pink, and white roses made up her bouquet, and the beautiful silver locket the studio had given her that hung around her neck completed her image. They had even supplied it with a picture of Tyler. Mary Ann and Nancy each had their dresses paid for as well, and they had even tailored Nancy's for free to accommodate her growing belly. The soft pink of their dresses matched the color of her roses perfectly. "Are we ready to get married?" Bronwyn asked. Laney had to admit, as they walked to the venue, that Bronwyn had done a fabulous job. Not only was the dress perfect, but Bronwyn had set up wooden fences around a section of the beach where the ceremony would take place. It was like they had transported Tyler's ranch to the beaches of Hawaii, and it was perfect. White chairs filled the beach, and delicate bows of tulle hung across the backs of them and down the aisle. They had strewn red, pink, and white flower petals across the white carpet runner that covered the beach, and a grand gazebo stood at the far end. Laney could just make out Tyler looking handsome in his tux, next to Aaron and another friend. "You look amazing," Laney's father said as he held out his arm. It had taken a few months, but eventually her father had warmed to Tyler and given them both his blessing. "Thanks, Dad." Laney watched as Nancy and then Mary Ann made their way down the aisle. She barely registered the cameras filming the ceremony. Bronwyn had been right. They were tasteful, and no reporters were in sight. When the music shifted, she made her way up the aisle with her father. Though she wouldn't have placed them there, it did not surprise Laney to see Peter, Justin, and the women from the show who had been promised a slot in the Maui spinoff sitting in the second row. At least they were all smiles today. As she walked past them, Tyler consumed her focus. She had almost given up on getting married and would never have imagined marrying someone she had known less than a year, but here she was, and she knew it was right. The pastor began to speak as she handed off her bouquet and took Tyler's hands. But her brain refused to focus on his words. Instead, she focused on Tyler's beautiful sapphire eyes, the ones she would get to look into every day, and his dashing smile that she would get to wake up to every morning. She wouldn't have thought it possible, but all the angst and all the worry was worth it for this moment when she would get to call him her husband. Tyler's heart thudded as he slid the ring on Laney's finger. He was so focused on how beautiful she was that he barely heard the pastor ask for the rings. Thankfully, Aaron was paying more attention and tapped his elbow. "With this ring, I thee wed." The words sounded simple, but Tyler felt the weight of them. He was bound to Laney now, but then again, he'd been bound to her since the first day when she fell into his arms. She slipped his ring on his finger and repeated the words. He knew his smile must match her own, because he felt like sunlight shone from every pore of his body. "By the power vested to me by God and the state of Hawaii, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." No words had ever sounded sweeter to Tyler, and he took no time leaning in and claiming Laney's lips as his own. Vaguely, he registered cheers and clapping, but he didn't care about them. He didn't care about the cameras or the contract. He simply cared about this moment that declared Laney was his wife. When the kiss ended, he held up their hands. Another round of clapping erupted, and then Tyler led the way down the aisle. He wasn't an aficionado of weddings, but he thought Bronwyn had done a fabulous job with the ceremony. As he followed her to another large roped-off area, he realized she had done just as much work with the reception. Beautifully decorated tables filled the area, and an elaborate floral arrangement sat in the center of each one. An outdoor DJ was set up to one side with large speakers mounted on tripods, and an open area sat in the middle, which Tyler assumed was for dancing. Bronwyn led them to the largest table, and the wedding party joined them shortly after. The rest of the guests filled in the tables. Waiters and waitresses in crisp white shirts and black pants appeared, carrying trays of delicious foods. An appetizer, a salad, and an entree graced Tyler's plate. But while the food was divine, he couldn't focus on it. The thought of holding Laney in his arms and later in his bed consumed his mind. Aaron gave a toast that he barely registered, but he flashed a smile whenever Aaron looked his way. Marianne must have shared some funny moments from the show, because the crowd chuckled, but he heard little of it as well. The one thing he did hear was the call for the first dance. Actually, he wasn't sure he heard it so much as he felt it, when all the eyes in the area turned to him and Laney grabbed his hand. She smelled sweet and flowery as he wrapped his arms around her, and he couldn't help stealing another kiss from her lips. "Thank you for being such a klutz," he whispered in her ear. Her response was a silver bell of laughter and a punch in the arm. "Thank you for catching me. If you hadn't, I probably would have broken something and not been a part of the show at all." "That would have been a travesty," he said. I couldn't agree more. Her arms tightened around his neck, and Tyler enjoyed the feel of her in his arms. The first dance ended, and Tyler reluctantly let go of her so she could dance with her father, and he with his mother. Before he knew it, the sun had drifted toward the horizon, the bouquet and garter had been tossed, and guests were beginning to issue their congratulations before disappearing up the beach. "Well, you did it, guys." It surprised Tyler to see Justin looking just as plastic, but a little less smarmy standing before them. "I have to admit I wasn't sure you would make it, but you proved me wrong. Of course, before you ride off in the sunset, I need one more thing from you." "What's that?" Laney asked beside him. "We need a short interview with two of you for the end of the episode." "Fine, let's do it now." Tyler wasn't really in the mood to give an interview, but he wanted nothing to interrupt his night with Laney, so it made more sense to get it over with and off his mind. Justin led them to where two chairs were placed together like a couch. The lights were already focused on it, and a crew member Tyler didn't remember manned the camera. He and Laney sat down and then waited for smarmy game show host Justin to appear. In 3, 2, 1, and there he was. "Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for tuning in with us tonight. I hope you enjoyed seeing Tyler's and Laney's wedding as much as I did. On the last episode, I told you I would catch up with them for a small question and answer session, and I have. So let's welcome Tyler and Laney Hall." The camera panned their direction, and Tyler tensed. He had not missed being on camera, and he would not miss it after tonight. "So, Laney, the viewers want to know if it was worth it going on the show, and if you would do it again." Laney's body was stiff beside him, but her voice was warm and poised when she spoke. "Well, Justin, I didn't originally audition for the show, but I'll answer as best as I can. As for it being worth it," she smiled at Tyler, "I can definitely say yes. Would I do it again? That's a harder question. I would do it again if I knew going in what the final outcome would be, but it's a lot harder than people think." "What made it so hard?" Justin pressed. "At first, it was watching Tyler with the other women and thinking I didn't have a chance. But it might have been even harder once I became a contestant, because I had to deal with the women not liking me and yet being unable to get away from the situation. All those women in one house," she shook her head, "is stressful." "It can be, but you handled it well, and people want to know your secret. How did you guys find lasting love once the camera stopped rolling?" Laney gazed up at him. "We trusted God." "And our hearts," Tyler added. "And we let ourselves fall," Laney said with a wide smile. Tyler matched her grin and squeezed her hand. "One more thing, Laney. I know you were filling in for us, and when the show ended, you were looking to continue your work as a makeup artist. I wanted to be the first to let you know that Elite Modeling Agency reached out to us and wanted to offer you a position on their team. What do you say?" Laney took a deep breath and stared evenly at Justin. "I would say thank you for the offer, but that isn't my life now. My life is with my husband on his ranch." She squeezed Tyler's hand and smiled at him. Well, there you have it, folks. Thanks for joining us tonight, and thank you, Laney and Tyler, for letting us share this day with you. We wish you all the best, and we'll see you at home next time on Who Wants to Marry a Cowboy? The camera stopped rolling and the lights turned off, leaving Tyler and Laney staring at each other under the stars. You handled that well. You're kind of natural on camera. She chuckled and laid her head on his shoulder. I think I'm done with cameras for a while. I'm perfectly content to just be Mrs. Hall. Well, almost perfectly content. Almost? What are you missing? She looked up at him with twinkling eyes and a mischievous grin. A baby? His heart soared as he leaned down and kissed her again. That I can certainly help with, he whispered in her ears. I thought maybe you could, she said as she kissed him again. As the sun set around them, Tyler couldn't help but smile at the way things had turned out. The end.